Welcome to Money Moves, brought to you by 274 Investment Managers. Here to make sense of developments in the economic and financial world and how they impact on your money. The big topic this week is the State of the Nation speech by President Jacob Zuma. And this is the speech that is going to give us a sense of the country's budget, how it's going to be allocated. And I'm joined by Waseem Thokan to discuss the speech and its market implications. Well, I know you guys take this thing seriously and you watch how the market responds to the speech, right? And in 2016 in particular, Waseem, what do you think is going to come out of that speech that may have impact on the markets?
Thank you very much, Tim. And I think, it's very important and very interesting. The market always watches the State of the Nation very closely in conjunction with a budget speech, which is obviously tends to be more market moving. But there's been a lot of talk around the market this year that people are actually watching the State of the Nation even more closely. And the reason really is quite simple, is that South Africa, as we know, has meaningful growth challenges, has meaningful inflation challenges. The international environment has deteriorated quite meaningfully, and the local environment has been deteriorating quite meaningfully we know consumers highly indebted, inflation moving up on the back of higher food and energy prices. And the issue comes down is, what it comes down to is, how does the government deal with these types of issues? How does the economic environment and the potential conflicting challenges of growth and inflation influence the way government allocates funds, the way it looks to produce a program for how it takes society forward? Now we've seen historically, the president tends to lay out a program of reforms or policies and lay out a key agenda at the State of the Nation, and this year will be no different. But this year it comes in the context of, as I said, a struggling economy and the overhang of ratings agencies who could downgrade us to junk in short order.
So basically, it is the government's response in particular, I suppose, from the market's point of view, how the government responds to the revised growth forecasts, the key thing, and how it prioritizes for the budget. What do you think, in terms of the budget itself, we should expect? How is Pravin Gordhan, Minister of Finance, going to respond, at least in terms of the allocations?
Tim, it's really interesting, and I think in a way it's going to be more of the same of what we've seen in recent years, but to some extent, things have been ratcheting up over a number of years. Now we know government's debt burden has been increasing over a number of years since the recession of 2009. It's now close on 50% of GDP, and ratings agencies and the market is getting very nervous around the capacity of government to produce growth-enhancing policy and allocate budgets to growth-enhancing initiatives while still maintaining that ability to repay the debt. Now, debt service costs have moved up meaningfully, meaning that the government is now paying more to service the debts the debt that they've accumulated on an ongoing basis. And that has obviously been worsened by the fact that major ratings agencies globally have downgraded us to BBB, which is one step above what you would call junk status or non-investment grade status. Now, what could potentially happen is that if growth continues to surprise on the downside, as you mentioned, and that has a direct implication on government revenue. So let me give you an example. Last year at the budget speech, Finance Minister Nene mentioned that the growth expectation for 2015 was 2.4%. That was downgraded kind of throughout the year. By the end of the year, 2015, we've seen that growth only came in at 1.3%. What the implication of that is there's likely to be a meaningfully lower tax intake for so government revenues have been scaled down by that lower growth. Now, that means that if government expenditures are kept the same over the medium-term expenditure framework, what happens is that there's implications for the deficit. And that deficit feeds directly into the expectations around ratings, which feed directly into our borrowing costs as a nation.
So, of course, that deficit, meaning government will have to go out and borrow.
More.
And if you have the status downgraded, then the cost of money
will
goes
become
up.
more expensive.
Yeah.
That means that the amount of the budget that needs to be allocated to service that debt becomes more, and that means there's less of the pie left to important things like education, healthcare, social security spending, and so forth.
Now, the intervention on the inflation side of things by the Reserve Bank raising interest rates, does it help in any way? And does it inform what government policy choices should be from the president's speech to the budget?
Reserve banks, central banks generally, and the Reserve Bank is no different, tend to operate at least nominally independent of the government or the fiscal authority. So what they do is set monetary policy, that's interest rates and supply of money, at a level which they believe keeps inflation under control. So, for example, South Africa is an inflation-targeting central bank. So the primary mandate of the Reserve Bank, therefore, is to keep inflation between a 3 and 6% bound. Now, they have indicated that their economic forecasting models show that inflation is likely to breach that both this year and next year, and that extended breach of the upper end of the inflation target indicates to them that they need to be more active in intervening to control inflation. Now, generally, when inflation comes about, at least partly it's driven by demand-side factors. So you and I demand more goods and services, and that allows for prices to increase because obviously more demand given the same supply increases the prices of things. This cycle is very different in that inflation is very much driven by supply side. So what's happening is that globally prices are increasing because of a variety of issues, and in South Africa is particularly vulnerable because the exchange rate has weakened a lot. So because the rand is now trading around 16 rand to the dollar compared to previously when may have been trading at say 12 rand a dollar, that means that everything that we import is now at a higher price than what it was previously. Similarly, because of the drought in South Africa, supply of food has declined. That means more food is being imported. And also the food that is produced in South Africa is now more expensive because it's more scarce. And that's in fact impacting on inflation. Now, normally why Reserve Banks increase interest rates is because they are responding to trying to reduce demand. So by making interest rates higher, they're making money more expensive. That means people are going to demand less because they have...
So things like credit cards, you can't just use them randomly. Now you pay a bit more attention.
You got to pay more attention to any interest-bearing debt that you're taking on. Your home loan, for example, or your car loan is likely to be more expensive if it's on a floating rate.
The Minister of Finance said that he is going to take all means possible to avoid the economy going into a recession. And of course, the implication of a recession is that South Africa will then be downrated further into junk status, I suppose. That's one of the things that the rating agencies are looking to see now in the next quarter. So the first initiative, meeting with 60 top CEOs, and then there's another meeting with the president and some top business executives. Tell me about these initiatives. What do you think of them, and what difference are they likely to make?
It's quite interesting, Tim, because we know that Pravin Gordhan is relatively new in the job again, if you want to call it that. And what he's come into the job, he's come into the job with quite significant credibility. We know that, after the replacement of Minister Nene with David van Rooyen, there was quite a meaningfully negative reaction in markets, and that, to some extent, sent a signal to government that, the finance ministry is not to be trifled with or not to be subject to political interference. And to some extent, that strengthens Minister Gordhan's position to some, within that finance ministry now that he's been appointed to. And what is done with that, I guess, political capital that he now enjoys is he's sought to actually make quite a big bang when coming into the position. So first of all, we heard that at the ANC Lekgotla, Minister Gordhan indicated or brought to the fore the idea that South Africa's debt could be controlled to some extent by limiting or reducing social welfare expenditure. That's been a historically quite controversial thing within the ANC. Of course, for different reasons. Of course, social welfare grants have actually played an important role in reducing inequality, but some of the more cynical, market participants and commentators out there talk about social grants as a means for political co-option almost, and therefore, it's quite interesting that Minister Gordhan has been able to grasp that hot potato. Now, the other hot potato is collaboration, more intensive collaboration with the private sector. And that's what we saw with the meeting with the 60 CEOs, where, by all accounts, some quite interesting discussions took place, from the introduction of some private sector experience into the board of parastatals to enhance governance, to, on the other side, the potential for moves towards private-public partnerships in the funding of parastatals, or even a new round of privatization. Now, I have mixed feelings on some of these
on whether
issues.
these things will work or not going forward.
Or whether they're even desirable on any level. But at the same time, the fact that that agenda is now represented within the Treasury to some extent is to me increases the robustness of the debate.
And I think it's going to become a big political issue going forward with the partners of government in the tripartite alliance, and other things like wage bill, what happens there. A lot of interesting stuff that is still going to be discussed on the political front. Waseem Thokan, thank you very much for having been with us here on Money Moves.